My legs were spasming. My eyes were wide. Sweat was falling from every single pore in my body. I vomited again. I could not believe what I was seeing. Riku just committed suicide and addressed me directly. Me, not Xehanort, me. I was put in control of Xehanort again as he responded to my movement command this time. All I could really do was take in what the hell just happened. Now I know. This is no hack. I used the camera controls to look around. Sora's blood and guts from earlier were still there, reacting whenever Xehanort stepped towards them. Riku's corpse just lay there on the sand as blood flowed from the wound made by the wooden sword stuck inside and into the water by the shore. Oddly enough, it felt as though he was looking at Xehanort the whole time, but I chalked it up to how he fell. Things started up again. The blood that entered the water tainted it, as red coloring started taking the place of the vast ocean slowly. I decided not to stick around to see what else happens and moved Xehanort towards the dock where Selphie usually sits in the original Kingdom Hearts. The wood holding the walkway together was broken, as the structure bent down like a pair of stairs, a la End of the World from the original Kingdom Hearts game. I moved Xehanort further down the mainland near the treehouse area. This was shocking. Throughout the whole area, I saw what appeared to be intestines of some sort of organic material strewn across the rock face and all across the wooden docks that must have survived whatever happened here. I ignored it for the sake of my sanity, moving closer to the secret place. As Xehanort advances to the secret place, the screen begins to crackle with static for each step he takes. By the time he's directly near the cave entrance, the whole screen becomes staticky, finally becoming nothing but static. Entering another loading screen, the static remaining throughout. The static finally begins to subside as I see him standing by the exit to the cave, parallel from the door. But I immediately freaked out. Instead of the usually rock sketches and rock textures one would expect, the rock face was replaced with organic muscle-looking matter. It was most likely just red color modification, while the sketches, such as one of Sora and Kairi for example, were replaced by real-life photos similar to the one I saw in the pause menu, lowered in size and apparently just pasted onto the texture itself. All the photos shown were of people being killed and taken apart in gruesome and grotesque ways, many of the depictions involving dismemberment. One depicted a little child, at least 7 years of age, whose upper body skin was removed in the shape of a t-shirt as he is seen staring at the camera filled with sorrow. The skin was discarded right near him, implying that the cameraman was the perpetrator. I almost dropped the PSP in my hands when I saw it. The other photos were even worse, so gruesome that I dare not describe them lest I vomit again. I had Xehanort running up to the door, only for the door to begin to move away from him. Must be intended because the longer I spent running towards the door, the more it moved away. I tried running back towards the exit, only it not to be there at all. It was a one-way road. After a time of running towards the door fruitlessly, a D-Link gauge finally appeared by Xehanort's HP gauge. Now I'm worried. So far, something in this game happens for a reason. Despite the trembling of my fingers, I cautiously pressed the right directional stick as the D-Link came up. There was only one option. I knew only one thing. It was a word written in binary code. What it meant, however, I had no clue. With a shuddering sigh, I pressed the X button. At that moment, a voice echoes from an unknown area as everything around Xehanort glows dark. When the wind blows, the cradle will fall. The floor disappears underneath Xehanort as he begins to fall, another loading screen starting up. Throughout the loading process, Xehanort is seen falling into an endless abyss. Another voice, this one sounding like Riku's. Down will come baby, cradle and all. After that verse of the nursery rhyme, I start to hear agonized screaming of random origin and random pitches echoing in the background of wherever Xehanort was. I started getting nervous again. How worse can this get? Stupid question. The loading symbol disappears after 1 minute of silence as Xehanort finally lands. I gain control of him right away as I scan my surroundings. This was the awakening. Jutting from the platform I was on is seen a walkway. The walkway was made up of more pasted in decapitation photographs, arranged in the shape of a curving path downwards. This spelled trouble in capital letters. Whatever this game was trying to tell me wasn't in a hurry. In fact, it was almost goading me to seek the answer out on my own. But I had come this far, endured too much shit, saw too much horror, not to know the answer. I deserved the answer. I moved Xehanort closer onto the photograph road, deciding against using the camera to examine them. I have enough stuff in my mind for years to come. Once he reaches the first tile and begins walking across, I hear screaming in the background. I stop and then take another step. Another scream, this one of higher intensity. Breathing hard but persistently, I have Xehanort run at full speed down the path. The screams practically bleed my ears out, but eventually I make it across the path and onto the awakening from the character select screen. There they were, Terra, Ventus, and Aqua, still impaled on the spikes from before. It looks as though the blood on the pieces has dried. I use the camera controls to find myself standing on Terra's piece of the awakening. I turn Xehanort around to see that the photograph pathway has disappeared. I was stranded. That's when I heard the sounds. God, those sounds. I hear squishing and moving as I see that the corpses attached to the spikes begin to writhe around in place. I use the camera controls to look around in first-person view. Ventus was simply moving around in place, while Aqua's head was spinning in place over and over, Exorcist style. The worst one yet was Terra. I see Terra's body place its hands around the spike, stabbing it, and proceeding to climb. Or should I say scoot or sample? I don't know. It was going up the spike near the tip. Once it got off the tip, it fell to the ground right next to Xehanort. With a grunt of effort, the body raises itself and stands upright. Xehanort jumps backwards beyond my control, the camera beginning to focus on Terra cutscene style. The time has come, Andrew, Terra says. I hear more squishing sounds as Aqua and Ventus finally find their way off of their spikes and are now facing Xehanort. This was it. Whatever the reason I'm playing this was right here in front of my eyes. What was eerie, what that was only their bodies contorted. Aqua was missing an ear, and one of Ventus's eyes were missing. Aside from that, everything else about them was perfectly normal, especially Terra. Aside from a stomach wound, he didn't have a scratch on him. It was almost as if nothing had ever happened to them. Maybe this was the symbol. The camera focuses on Aqua and Ventus, looking at me through the camera. When the wind blows, Ventus says, the cradle will fall. Aqua says. The camera switches to Terra. And down will come Andrew, cradle and all, Terra says. Finally, I get pissed and yell my head off. I was desperate, scared, and concerned. What's the cradle? What's the wind? What the hell are you guys? I yell. I know they won't respond. It's just a game, but I couldn't hold it in any longer. Why am I playing this? Aqua and Ventus look at each other, then back at me. They both summon the Keyblades. The camera switches to Terra, who also summons his Keyblade. I'm scared now. It felt as though they were about to come out of the PSP and hack me to bits. The camera switches to Xehanort, who summons his own Keyblade in response. A brief loading screen processes as another dark photograph briefly flickers on screen. It was too fast for me to see, but it looked familiar to me for some reason. The tune to the nursery rhyme, Cradle, begins to play in the background. The screen ends as another information bar hovers over the screen with a message similar to the one that was written on the enclosed note. Maintain the cradle, see the void. Terra immediately rushes towards Xehanort as I gain control of him. I have Xehanort guard against Terra's attack and use Counter Hammer, Terra's counter command in the original game. The attack does a lot of damage to both Terra's HP and his body. The force of the hammer pushes one of his arms off as it falls into the void below. Terra continues his attack as I proceeded to repeat the counter hammer strategy over and over until his HP was at its final gauge. Xehanort guards another attack while I get a glimpse at my enemy. His body was practically destroyed at this point. Terra's ears are gone, as well as his left arm. His flesh was mangled while his armor cracked. The stomach wound that he had when I got to this place was expanded beyond repair, and his right eye was gone. It was like something out of an autopsy photo. I resisted the urge to vomit as I used one of the commands Xehanort had in his command deck, Dark Haze. Xehanort cloaks himself in darkness and rushes at Terra, running him, well, what's left of him, through with the Keyblade. At this point, the scene zooms in on Xehanort and Terra as I receive a prompt to press X repeatedly. I do so as it switches to a reaction sequence. Xehanort pulls his sword out of Terra's body as Terra tries to grab his Keyblade. Xehanort then knocks Terra against the head with the guard of his weapon as Terra finally falls to his knees, spent. Xehanort then lifts his Keyblade into the air, and with an insane chuckle that sounded suspiciously like a man from real life, swung his weapon. Terra's head graphically comes off at the seams as it rolls off the platform the two are on and falls into the abyss. The area where the head once stood began to explode with blood in small parts as the entire body slumps to the ground lifelessly. Xehanort chuckles again, giving the body a push with his right boot. The body rolls off of the platform and into the chasm to join the head that adorned it. This is becoming really offensive. Kingdom Hearts was not some bloody samurai action flick. It was a children's game. I regain control of Xehanort as Ventus jumps from his piece of the awakening and engages Xehanort right away. The counter hammer strategy wouldn't work with Ventus. He was way too fast. The only thing to do is beat fire with fire. I used another one of the commands, Ars Solum, to attack Ventus after I had guarded a few of his attacks. Xehanort assaulted Ventus with slash after slash of his Keyblade as I saw how damaging they were. Ven's HP gauge had been reduced to its final gauge already. But that wasn't the half of it. Oh no. His body was entirely mutilated by the attack Xehanort had used. Slash marks adorned his body, while I see his remaining eye hanging out of its socket. The stomach wound he had when I had reached this place was expanded and eaten through so much that his spine was now visible to the naked eye. His arms were just bone now. All of the tissue and flesh had been shaving off during Xehanort's slash frenzy. The blood from the muscles flooded the platform the two were on as Ventus advances on Xehanort again. I was desperate to end this nightmare as fast as I could, so I used Dark Haze again after I had dodged some of his attacks. The attack ran Ventus through as another prompt came up. Another reaction sequence started. Xehanort removed his weapon from Ventus's body as he jumps into the air, slamming the Keyblade into the platform. Sharp masses of rock pierce Ventus's body as one of them pokes through his arm, the arm falling onto the platform. The rest of the body falls and gets itself caught in another rock form. The tip of the rock finds itself established through the stomach wound, so it does little damage. Ventus tries to struggle free, but can't, since his spine is serving as support for the form. The game prompts me to press X again, as I do so. After I succeeded, I immediately wish I hadn't. Xehanort raises his left hand, covered in darkness, as the rock bends themselves to his will, the main one going further through Ven's stomach wound. Xehanort then arranges and moves his hand, causing the rock forms to twist and mutate themselves as the rest of them pierce various parts of Ven's body. A clap of Xehanort's hands finally stops them, while Xehanort keeps his hands clamped together. Ventus screams in agony, his voice distorted for some odd reason. The nursery tune in the background plays faster as Xehanort finally spreads his arms into the air. The rock form explodes in a shower of light as Ven's body is ripped apart by the pressure. Parts and blood drips down into the chasm below as Xehanort picks up something resembling brain matter, tossing it downward. I regain control of Xehanort as Aqua jumps into the platform. She enters combat stance and begins walking around the platform piece cautiously, waiting for me to make a move. She's a mage, so long distance attacks aren't a good idea. I use R Solum as my first move. Aqua manages to dodge the attack completely as she launches shards of ice at Xehanort. I manage to dodge all of the shards but one. And then I feel it. A sharp pain in my mind just when the shard connected. I was worried for my life, but I just had to keep going. I have Xehanort attack with a 3-hit combo, interrupting a possible thunder spell from Aqua. At that moment, I seize my chance and use R Solum. The attack, like with the others, does major damage, sending Aqua's HP plummeting to its final gauge. I try to use Dark Haze to follow up, but she predicts this and cartwheels out of the way, the attack failing. She then sends a fireball at Xehanort, which I manage to send flying back at her. It connects, flames covering her body. While she grabs her head and begins screaming in agony, her voice distorted as well. I seize the chance and finally attack her with a 3-hit combo. Her HP dies down as I receive another X prompt and another reaction sequence. Xehanort puts his hand directly through the flames and picks up Aqua in a bear hug. He presses on her body hard as I hear a loud, crunching sound. I know what had happened. He's broken her spine. Next, he lifts her up into the air with both hands and starts to pull on her body from both sides. The final scream from Aqua is heard as her body is finally ripped into 2 symmetrical halves. After waiting for the blood and gore to fall from the halves, Xehanort laughs and throws the 2 halves into the pit. The camera then enters cutscene mode, while I myself take the time to vomit all over the floor. Xehanort begins to cackle madly, his voice different. He sounded like a man in his mid-30s, the audio directly ripped or recorded from whoever made this. At that moment, more gruesome real-life decapitation photos flood the screen in rapid precision. I begin breathing heavily again as I wait for them to pass. A man hooked to a machine, having his jawbone ripped in half by opening his mouth way too wide. A woman tied to a conveyor belt, a meat grinder in front of her. A man strapped to an electric chair on fire from the electricity, out of the Green Mile. A little boy having his intestines pulled out from his stomach as his eyes are kept open by clamps, forcing him to watch. And others way too horrific to describe on this account. Finally, the photos pass, as Xehanort begins to walk towards the edge of the platform piece he was on. I have a good feeling that I know what he's going to do. He takes his keyblade and turns it on himself, just like Riku had done earlier. He stabs himself with the keyblade as it stays on his body. He turns to look at me through the camera. The bow has broken, Andrew, Xehanort says in his normal voice. Down will come Andrew, cradle and all. The hairs on my neck stood on ends as Xehanort finally falls off of the platform, giving himself over to the abyss he had discarded the others in. Another gruesome photo plasters itself onto the screen as the tune in the background continues to play. It depicted the remains of a boy's body that had been shattered due to a long fall. The brain matter and blood were spread out along what looks like grass. That's when I see it. Across from the body was the broken remains of baby's cradle. The photo then disappears as another one takes its place. It's the same picture, but shot from a different angle. A tree branch is visible, and next to the branch was the body's face. It's my face. With a loud scream, I throw my PSP across the room as it hits the wall with a wham! The parts for the console fly around and land in separate areas while the screen lands nearby. I noticed that despite the impact, it's the only thing that was completely intact, and it looked like there was still something on the screen. My curiosity gets the better of me as I get up and wade through my own vomit, finally ending up next to the screen. It was still on. So this is where the note ends here. 2 days after the incident, local police agencies found the remains of the body of Andrew Doe by a tree outside of his house. An autopsy revealed that the cause of death had been due to an impact that crushed all of his internal organs. Since there were no witnesses and no evidence to support the possibility of murder, the case was deemed a suicide and closed indefinitely. 2 years prior to the incident, a 30-year-old man was arrested for killing his 18-year-old son by tying him to the insides of a wooden cradle and pushing him off of the roof of their home. The child had died upon impact with the ground. The father was given the death penalty. The mother of the child disappeared and was never found.